It's October 1960. You're a trader on the London gold market for 15 years. The price of gold has been locked. It is $35 per troy ounce. It's not a suggestion. It's the foundation of the entire global economy. But today it's not $35. The ticker flashes $36. Then $38. By the end of the day it touches $40. That's a 14% spike in 24 hours. To you this might look like a profit. To the world's central banks it looks like the end of the world, because the entire global financial system is built on that $35 price, and that promise was just broken. This was the first major crack in a system called Bretton Woods, and it triggered one of the most secret high-stakes price-fixing schemes ever attempted. A scheme run not by criminals, but by the 8 most powerful central banks on earth. To understand what's happening in our economy today, we have to go back. We have to understand the secret story of the London gold pool. In 1944, the world was in ruins. 730 delegates from 44 allied nations met at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They had one goal: build a new financial system that would prevent another Great Depression. The system they built was simple and brilliant. The United States, now the world's only industrial superpower, held 70% of the world's gold. That's $26 billion in gold, sitting in vaults at Fort Knox. So the US made a promise: the US dollar would be as good as gold. The price was fixed: $35 for 1 troy ounce. Any foreign central bank at any time could exchange its dollars for physical gold at that price. All other currencies, the British pound, the French franc, the German mark, were pegged to the dollar. This created stability. It rebuilt Europe. It financed 20 years of global prosperity. But it had one fatal flaw: the system only works if the US has enough gold to back up all the dollars it prints, and it only works if the world believes the US won't just print more. For the first decade it was easy. The world needed dollars to rebuild, and the US supplied them. But then the 1950s turned into the 1960s. The US had 2 new massive expenses: the Great Society programs at home and the expanding Vietnam War abroad. Both were paid for with printed money. Dollars began flooding the world. This is called a balance of payments deficit. More money was leaving the US than coming in, and foreign countries started looking at their growing piles of dollars. Then they looked at the US gold supply, and they started doing the math. By 1959, US gold holdings had dropped from $26 billion to $195 billion, but the number of dollars held by foreign nations' claims on that gold had grown to $19 billion. The safety margin was gone. The ratio was almost 1:1. Any small panic could trigger a run on the bank, a run on Fort Knox. And that panic arrived in October 1960, right before the Kennedy-Nixon election. Investors got spooked. They feared a new president would mean more spending and more inflation. They believed the dollar was about to lose value, so they did the logical thing: they dumped their dollars and bought gold on the open market in London. This is what caused that price spike to $40. It proved the $35 peg was just a promise, not a law of physics. US officials were terrified. They realized they couldn't defend the dollar alone. They needed backup. They needed a cartel. Which brings us to November 1961, and secret officials from 8 of the world's most powerful central banks met: the United States, the United Kingdom, West Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. They called themselves the London Gold Pool. The plan was blunt price manipulation. They would pool their gold reserves, a combined $24 billion, to create a war chest. The Bank of England would be their agent. The rules were simple: if the market price of gold threatened to rise above $3,520, the pool sells its gold onto the market. This flood of new supply would force the price back down. If the price dropped below $35, the pool buys gold, taking it off the market to support the price. The United States agreed to cover 50% of all gold sales. The other 7 nations would split the remaining 50%. It was a gentleman's agreement to fix the price of gold to maintain the illusion that the system was stable for a few years. It worked from 1962 to 1965. The market was calm. The public saw the price holding steady at $35 and believed the system was sound. But behind the scenes, the pool was bleeding. They were constantly selling gold to fight off market demand. In its first year, the pool sold over $200 million in gold. This wasn't a permanent fix. It was a finger in a dam that was cracking everywhere because the underlying problem wasn't being solved. He demanded that its $15 billion in dollar reserves be redeemed for physical gold. At the $35 price as promised, this wasn't a request. It was a demand. De Gaulle famously sent the French Navy to New York Harbor to pick up the gold. It was a geopolitical power move, and it was a direct attack on the gold pool. In 1967, France officially withdrew from the pool. A massive global run on gold began. Everyone wanted out of paper currencies and into physical metal, and the London gold pool was the only thing standing in the way. The remaining 7 members were now forced to sell billions of dollars worth of their own national reserves. The Bank of England's trading floor was in chaos. The pool was selling $50 million of gold a day, then $100 million. U.S. gold reserves, which were $195 billion in 1959, had plunged to just $121 billion. The pool members in Europe were furious. They were burning their national treasures to finance America's war. The end came in March 1968. On March 8, the pool sold a record 175 tons of gold. It wasn't enough. On March 14, the market demand was so high the pool had to sell for 100 tons. In 1 week, the pool members dumped over 1,000 tons of gold. This was a full-blown panic. The system was collapsing in real time. Late that night, an emergency call was placed from the U.S. Federal Reserve to the Bank of England. The message was simple: shut it down. On Friday, March 15, 1968, the U.S. government made an official unprecedented request. They asked the Queen of England to close the London gold market, and she did for the first time since World War I. The world's most important gold market went dark. The gold pool had failed. It was officially and quietly disbanded. The price-fixing scheme was over when the dust settled. The central bankers met in Washington. They couldn't admit defeat. They couldn't admit the $35 price was a lie. So they created one last illusion. They announced the 2-tier gold system. This is where it gets interesting. Tier 1 was the official market. Central banks would only trade gold with each other, and they promised to keep using the $35 price. Tier 2 was the private market. Investors and speculators could buy and sell gold at whatever price the free market decided. The central banks just walked away. They abandoned the London market. This was a public confession. It was an admission that they had lost control. They were hoping the private market price would stay close to $35. They were wrong. When the London market reopened 2 weeks later, the price of gold didn't open at $35. It opened at $43 per ounce. The peg was broken. The world now had 2 prices for gold: a fake official price of $35 and a real market price of $43. This 2-tier system was a ticking time bomb. It only lasted 3 years, from 1968 to 1971. Foreign countries looked at the 2 prices. Why would anyone hold a US dollar, a claim on gold, at $35 when the real market price was $43? And why would the US ever sell its gold for $35 when it could get $43 on the open market? The system was a total lie, which brings us back to Charles de Gaulle. Now every country started doing what he did. Germany, Switzerland, Japan, they all began redeeming their dollars for gold. The run on Fort Knox was back, and it was faster than ever. U.S. gold reserves fell from $12 billion to $10 billion. The U.S. was bleeding gold. By August 1971, the U.S. was facing a choice: either lose all of its gold or break its promise. On August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon appeared on national television. He announced he was temporarily suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. The gold window was closed. That temporary suspension is now 54 years old. In that moment, the Bretton Woods system died. The London gold pool's collapse 3 years earlier wasn't the cause of the end. It was the proof that the end was inevitable. It was the fever that broke. It was the moment the world's most powerful institutions tried to fix the price of money and failed. They proved that no cartel, no matter how powerful, can fight a market forever. You cannot print trillions of dollars, promise it's all backed by gold, and expect no one to do the math. The London gold pool was a 7-year war against a simple number, and the number won. The story of the gold pool raises a critical question. Today, central banks still intervene in bond markets, currency markets, and stock markets. So here is the debate: did the gold pool fail because price fixing is always doomed to fail? Or did it fail simply because the U.S. government ran the printing press too hard? Is it a failed tactic or a failed policy? Let me know which one you think it is in the comments and subscribe, because in the next video, we'll cover what happened immediately after the gold window closed, the 1970s Great Inflation, and the birth of the world we live in today.